All right, you want to start with the Eastern Conference standings then?
Yes, I would love to.
All righty, I'll read out mine, you read out yours, and then we'll read out the final standings and talk about where we went really wrong. So I'll go 15-1. I had Chicago at 15, Montreal at 14, New York City at 13, the Columbus Crew at 12. I'm sorry. Miami at 11, Atlanta at 10, DC at 9, Charlotte at 8, New England at 7, Toronto at 6. And you want to know why I have Toronto at 6?
Here we
Because of you.
go.
We'll talk about that in a little bit. FCC at 5, Nashville at 4, Philly at 3, the greatest team on turf, New York Red Bull at 2, and Orlando at 1. So here's what I'm thinking, by the way, before you go. What we'll do is we'll talk about the ones we missed blatantly, and then we'll talk about some of the teams that made the playoffs and we picked them out of the playoffs, and we'll talk about thoughts there as well. Because I think for the most part, we're okay.
Okay.
But after you.
All right. For me, Chicago at 15, Montreal at 14, DC at 13, Charlotte at 12, NYC at 11, Atlanta at 10, Columbus at 9, Miami at 8, Revs at 7, Red Bull at 6, Nashville at 5, Cincy at 4, Toronto at 3, Orlando at 2, Philly at 1.
And of course, the final standings go as follows: Toronto in dead last, Miami in 14th, Chicago in 13th, DC in 12th, New York City in 11th, Montreal in 10, Charlotte at 9, Red Bull at 8, Nashville at 7, Atlanta at 6, New England at 5, Philly at 4, Columbus at 3, Orlando at 2, and FCC with the Supporter Shield at 1. So here is what I'll have to say. Toronto were bottom 2 for me when I made these predictions, and Connor forced me without any regard for my decisions or my needs and told me I have to put them in the playoff because how could you not, he says. Look at this team with Insigne and Bernadeschi and Bob Bradley making all these changes, and they got Jimenez and all these strikers. Oh my God, they're going to be great. And I said, Connor, I don't want you to. He threatened to leave the pod if I didn't do it. And I was like, I need you to stick around just in case I ever get sick and have to miss something. You can continue it on. So I did it for the sake of the pod. I had to make this change. And because of that, it cost me a correct prediction. Connor, I'm here. I'm ready for your apology whenever you'd like to give it.
Hope you, I hope you remember that we have this documented so people can go and listen and
Our
hear that I
offline,
did not force you to do anything.
our offline communication is not documented, but it should probably be now because it's getting to a point where I need it. I need the proof.
Well, there would be no proof because there was
That's
no
what
offline
I'm saying.
conversation.
Listen, my word against yours. I
You
think we
could
know
see
who's
you make the change on air. I did not have to coerce you to do anything. I made my point. You said, I know you are extensive in your ball knowledge and you are fantastic with predictions. So I will move mine more towards yours, but I won't put it the same because I don't want to be labeled a copier. And that is a direct quote from you from that
and
episode.
that's how you know it's a lie because Connor just gave himself 3 compliments in quoting me, which you know will never happen. So let's talk about, for me, the Columbus Crew. I had them in 12th. I was really not sold on the Cucho Hernandez Lucas Zelarayan connection, thinking it was going to be because they started off really hot and then kind of faltered towards the end of last season. And I thought, oh, it's going to die out. I also was not super sold on Aiden Morris. Aiden Morris being one of the best players in the league, age irrelevant. Um, but yeah, definitely was not as sold as I should have been. There were also questions about Wilfred Nancy and his system. I didn't think he was going to have the team to run his system as early as he got it. So credit to the crew as well to put that together for him. But yeah, for me, it was just the individuals that I wasn't super sold on, and I thought that they needed more time to put that together.
I guess I'll also talk about the crew because I was off 6 spots on them.
Mhm.
I was not sold, if I remember right. I'm just talking off the dome here. I have no idea what I said. But if I somewhat remember, I think I was leaning lower on Columbus because I wasn't sold in their defense. And in some part, that ended up being a valid opinion. They weren't awful, but 46 goals conceded is on the higher side of playoff teams. What I didn't expect, and it was the same line of thinking as you, was for the attack to explode as much as it had. Definitely didn't expect Cucho, Zelleran, and I know they brought in guys later to contribute as effectively as they did in the attack. I mean, it resulted in them having the best attack in the league. So I think I think we just undersold how good they were going to be going forward this season.
Well, and I think the other thing that I didn't put a lot of weight on was the youth arrival of this team. So Milos Dejenik left halfway through the year. Uh, Mensa was sold before the season started, and now you're thinking, okay, you've got Rudy Camacho, and he came in late. So you're looking at like, what's his center back situation look like? Philip Quintone did really, really well. Patrick Schulte in goal held his own. Steven Moreira playing as a right-sided center back in a 3-back formation. And then you have other players in the likes of, where'd he go? Yeah, Sean Zawadski was also really vital for them this year. So players stepping up that you didn't expect to step up. And that's always going to be, for me, the biggest separation between prediction and where they ended up is the players you don't quite know about who are going to step up and do things. So really big. And we talked about Jason Russell Rowe as well. And a couple of, Mo Farsi has been electric this year. Players that you just didn't expect to have the year that they did, stepping up and doing the job. So that's kind of where my big separation was in that prediction. I also had, you and I both also had Atlanta out of the playoffs, both at 10. I'll let you kind of talk about that first.
Well, I don't think our prediction was that bad in terms of Atlanta because until they made signings in the summer transfer window, I really think that they were probably headed for that range of just outside the playoffs. But I think, and I hate to give them credit because I do not think they do a very good job, but the front office did a good job in getting in reinforcements to help push Atlanta make the playoffs. The guys came in, clicked, did well, filled some of the holes that we needed, and we were able to climb into a secure playoff spot. But I will stand by it. I think we had the right idea. And obviously we can't predict exactly what's going to happen in the summer transfer window, but I would say for the first half of the year, we were pretty accurate on where we thought Atlanta would finish.
Yeah, I'm actually going to look it up right now where they were at the league's cup break, which started in July, I believe. Is that right? 2023. Yeah, it started July 21st. So if I look up really quick here, tables, match day and table. Oh, it won't let me pick from, so I gotta guess around here and pick the right match day. Oh wow, almost right on the money there. 23. 25. Yeah, so let's say match day 25. 25 games in, they were sixth at the table. They were right where they were, but they were only at a 10th spot. They were 9 points out of the 10th spot. So these players did make a bit of an impact from there. There were players who overperformed. I think Caleb Wiley comes to mind pretty quickly there, one of those guys who came in. But as you mentioned, players who were able to keep that level where they were as other teams were getting better. The signing of Zande Silva, the signing of Saba Lobjandize. We're going to work on that pronunciation. and Muyumba. All three of those guys came in and made an instant impact and were able to keep their level where they belong. Does that give them the ability to come in and make a difference in the playoffs? I don't know. But I think if you don't bring those signings in, along with Giacomakis, by the way, who missed a lot of time for injuries and such, him and Almada were dirty, and that was another one that you weren't quite sure how it was going to come off. You had a feeling they was going to be good, but that good, I wasn't expecting that good. So, yeah, just again, overperformance of players. The Miles Robinson return was good. We've talked about how we weren't really sold on Brad Guzan, and then their depth was kind of iffy as well. So, good signings in the off season to get them back to where they belong.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize that we were that high up in the table, but I think, and maybe I'm misremembering again, but I feel like we were trending in the wrong direction. And then we brought in the signings and they were able to kind of steady the ship. So I guess maybe it wasn't so more so that we had it right in the first half, but I think we may have ultimately gotten to the right range had they not brought people in to kind of steady the ship, as I mentioned. So I still think we were on the right track with our prediction.
Yeah, like I said, it's they did well to, and I think there's a quote out there somewhere from the sporting director that just said, "We didn't feel we were good enough, so we went out and made the changes necessary to become good," and that's a massive credit to their front office, who has been hit or miss. I'm not gonna lie about that, but um, to go out and admit, yeah, we kind of weren't as good as we want to be, so we changed that, is a great look for them. So to me, it's time to talk about Toronto FC. So as I mentioned, Connor forced me to put them high. I said from the beginning, there's no way this team can be successful when they're playing with a three-man center midfield, all of them over the age of 30. We've actually gone down this road before. You can check it out in episode 187, I think, what went wrong for Toronto FC. What went wrong is that they had bad DPs. They had prima donna DPs. They didn't trust the coach. Their locker room was a mess, and they had a bad roster build. I saw it from the beginning. I predicted them there from the beginning, and Connor forced me to get rid of it. So I just want to put it out there that I saw it. I know ball, and Connor is going to be. We don't have a fine system here on the pod, but we're actually about to implement one. Funny enough.
Oh, you're such a pain. I mean, I guess you were somewhat right on the idea that they needed more midfield depth, but let's be honest. Let's be honest. Slow your roll. Let's be honest. There was way more wrong with Toronto than just a lack of midfielders.
And I highlighted it in the episode, so go back and listen to it.
Yes, if you want to know what went wrong for Toronto FC, go check out our episode on that.
And then go back and listen to the predictions, the original predictions. I highlighted it before you made me move them.
Yeah, but then you didn't stick to it because you're a wimp. Anyway.
Talk to me about Toronto. You also have to talk to me about Miami. Swing and a miss there.
Yeah. So Toronto, I thought they were trending in the right direction. I thought Insigne and Bernadeschi were coming in. I thought giving them a half a season, kind of get familiar with the league. I think they showed a little bit of promise in being able to hit the strides that I think a lot of people were expecting for them. And then I thought they did a good job bolstering the rest of the team. I mean, they brought in veteran guys that know how to get it done, Matt Hedges and Sean Johnson. And they brought in Rosted, who I thought would be another good addition to the back line. They really bolstered the team a lot. Definitely had some holes, as we've mentioned, but I thought there was enough talent there that Insigne Bernadeschi would be able to hit the levels that we were expecting for them. And I think if they had done that, they were going to soar up the table. I mean, those two were going to be able to put together a deadly attack that was going to be one of the tops in the league. You know, they had a coach that knows how to get it done in this league. I felt the pieces were there on paper, but I mean, as soon as you have disconnect between your star players and your head coach, that was instantly, I feel like, the moment Toronto's season was done. I mean, it was a mess in the locker room. Your star players don't want to be there anymore. And that's it. The season was cooked at that point. So maybe things would have been different if you put a different head coach in charge, someone that connected a bit better with Insigne and Bernadeschi. But that was not the case. And because of that, my prediction was way off.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Well, you
And
still
then
have to
my
explain Miami as well. So
yes. So I thought Miami had a strong year last year in a situation where they just didn't have a great team on paper. I thought they did well to get the most out of the pieces that they had while they were still recovering from the penalties that they got. And then I thought they were going to be able to carry that momentum into the season. And, guys that were younger were going to, continue to step up and develop. And I thought they made some good offseason moves to bring in some more people to help out, like Josef Stefanelli. Wasn't even thinking about like any of the Messi or other summer transfer window moves that they made, but I thought they were going to be able to sustain enough and be able to sneak into the playoffs in a play-in spot, but they definitely went a step backwards. I think a lot of the pieces that they had performing the year prior kind of went, I don't know, I guess more towards back to earth, and the team looked more like what we were expecting probably 2 years ago from them. Or I guess I should say, yeah, I would say like what we expected from them at the start of the 22 season. Um, and then obviously, Messi and friends coming in wasn't enough time for them to be able to turn things around for them. So at that point, once they were in such a bad spot at the start of the year, it was kind of wrapped up for them already. I mean, I know we talked about when we were doing predictions, maybe like 5 or 6 games out or whatever, that there was still like a decent chance that they'd be able to get in. But I think enough key injuries made it so that they just didn't have the resources or the time to be able to turn things around. So they fell short of my expectation for them.
want it on record once again that Connor has not apologized for ruining my predictions.
No,
Get
and
it
I
out
won't.
there. Most people recognize that, but we'll fix it. The only other one that we need to talk about is Red Bull underperforming my prediction of second. Um, I was full on board. The Gerard Struber is going to finally get his pieces and figure out how to use them, and he ended up being sacked like 10 games into the season. Um, I think there was a distrust there, and I didn't realize how much he didn't want to be here. Like when he was let go, and the first thing he said was, "Yeah, um, I've wanted to get back to Europe for a long time, so I'm glad they let me do it." Which basically told me he had Red Bull Global in his pocket saying, "Yeah, you're going to come once the season's over." And he said, "I want to go now." And they were basically like, "Well, we've got a spot for you, but you got to wait." And then he just tanked the season until he could um, get back. It was really disappointing to hear his mindset as he was leaving. It wasn't yeah, I messed up, it's on me. And he actually did an interview with one of the Red Bull podcasts I listened to, and they were like, "Oh, well, what'd you learn from your time in America?" Basically gave a non-answer, like, "I didn't learn anything, like you guys didn't really do much for my career, blah 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 blah." Like he was very non-committal on all that stuff. So it was disappointing. I was kind of backing him to be a very, very good coach this year, and he let it down. Now Troy Lessane's come in and done a great job to get us where we need to be. I think the other thing that hurt us the most was the injury to Lewis Morgan, which was a massive part of our attack in 2022, and the suspension and lack of performance, and then season-ending injury to our $6 million striker. So we were attacking with Tom Barlow for 37 games. And I like Tom. I think he works really hard. He's great in the press. His underlying numbers are fantastic. But you need to pair him with somebody who can do the finishing, which is what Morgan or Van Zier were supposed to do. And it just never came together. The fact that we're even in the position that we're in is a miracle that Troy Lesesne has pulled off. And as I mentioned, now that we're getting everybody back, it is full steam ahead to the MLS Cup. So, yeah, I think the injuries hurt us and the lack of faith in our coach hurt us, but we are into the playoffs and we're good to go.
Sounds like a bunch of excuses for being wrong.
Sounds like you got a bunch of malarkey going on. I had Charlotte in the playoffs, which is good, and I had DC making the playoffs as well. I thought Rooney was going to get it done.
Oh yeah, I remember that conversation.
And get his pieces in. Yeah, I was real high on him. I thought he was ready to get it done, and he unfortunately couldn't get across the line, and he got real close. But again, we talked about this in the episode, what went wrong with DC United. The home form was poor. The player signings and off the field issues, which nobody can predict in predictions, hurt them massively, losing one of their best attackers correctly, by the way, to the incidents off the field and having to let him go, which was the right move, also played into a bunch of issues there. So that's what tore mine out. And I'm looking at yours. Playoff, talked about, playoff, talked about. We talked about Atlanta. You had Charlotte out of the playoffs. I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit.
I mean, if you want me to, it wasn't.
Yeah.
They were basically 2 steps out of the playoffs the entire season, and it snuck in right at the end.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
I mean, they just didn't look great at the start of the season on paper, and I would still argue that even by the end of the season, they still didn't look great. I think they just found the right form that they needed to at the end of the year and was able to just sneak in. I mean, realistically, they shouldn't have been a playoff team. And it's the same argument you've had with Red Bull. Neither should Red Bull have. The cutoff really should have been like at Nashville. Because there just seemed to be different levels, 1 through 7 and then 8 through 15 in the Eastern Conference. So I definitely don't feel like I was far off by saying that Charlotte was not going to make the playoffs in 12th and versus them sneaking into a play-in at 9.
Just wanted to see what you had to say. That's all.
Yeah, no. And you got to hear what I thought.